My name is Diana Reeves. I am 32 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that family was something you built together, even when the work was uneven, even when the weight landed mostly on one side. I told myself that was just how it went sometimes, that it would balance out, that the people who loved you eventually noticed. I stopped believing that the morning I found out I had not been invited to my own brother's wedding, not because of a fight, not because of something I had said or done. They had simply decided, at some point over dinners I had not been included in, that I made things complicated. That was the word my mother used when I finally heard it. Complicated. As if 6 years of covering their rent, their car payments, their emergency bills had made me some kind of liability instead of a daughter. The invitation list for my brother's wedding had gone out in October. I found out in November, when a cousin called to ask what I was wearing to the ceremony. I had gone still on the phone, the words not quite landing at first. I told her I was still deciding. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table in my apartment in Columbus and stared at the wall for a long time without moving. I had not received an invitation. I went through every possibility in my mind, the way you do when the truth is too clean to accept. Maybe it was lost in the mail. Maybe my email had filtered it out. Maybe there had been a miscommunication with the venue about capacity. I checked my inbox 3 times. I checked the mailbox downstairs. I refreshed the spam folder. Nothing. That evening, I sent my brother a text. Short, casual, the kind that did not reveal how my hands had felt when I typed it. Just checking on the wedding details, I wrote, haven't seen anything yet. He left it on read for 2 days. When he finally replied, the message was 4 lines. He said the ceremony was going to be small. He said they were keeping it to immediate family and close friends. He said he hoped I understood. He said he would call soon. He never called. I want you to understand what the silence after that message felt like. Not the shock of it, because some part of me had been bracing for something like this for longer than I wanted to admit. It was more like confirmation. The kind that does not surprise you but still cuts deep, the way you can know a door is going to slam and still flinch when it does. I had been the one paying their rent for 6 years. My brother and his now fiancé had moved into the apartment below our parents' house when they first got together, back when neither of them was stable enough to afford it alone. My mother had asked me to cover it for a few months, just until they got settled. That was in the spring. By fall, it had become a standing arrangement nobody ever mentioned out loud. $1,200 a month, transferred from my account on the first, every single month for 6 years. I had also been covering my parents' car insurance, my mother's phone plan, the occasional medical copay, the grocery runs when things were tight. I had a spreadsheet. I had always kept a spreadsheet because numbers made the weight easier to measure when everything else was too vague to name. The total, when I actually added it up that November evening, was not something I had let myself look at in full before. Somewhere close to $90,000 over the years, if I counted everything. I stared at the number until it blurred. I was not on the deed of the apartment. I was not on any lease. My name appeared nowhere in any official document tied to that property or any other. I had been paying for a life that belonged entirely to other people. And when it came time to fill the seats at a ceremony, my brother and my mother had looked at the list and decided I complicated things. The next few weeks moved slowly. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner and let it go cold while I sat at the table with my laptop, not working, just open to the spreadsheet the way you keep returning to a bruise to test whether it still hurts. My mother called twice. The first time, I let it go to voicemail. Her message was breezy, asking about Thanksgiving, mentioning that she had found a good deal on flights for my aunt. She did not mention the wedding. The second time I answered. She asked how I was doing in the tone she used when she already knew the answer and wanted to skip past it. I told her I was fine. She said that was good. There was a pause and then she said, very evenly, that my brother's wedding was going to be a private affair, that they wanted it intimate, that I should not take it personally. I asked her directly if I had been excluded from the guest list. She said that was not how she would put it. I asked her how she would put it. She said that sometimes families needed to make difficult decisions for the sake of harmony. She said she hoped I could respect that. Then she changed the subject to Thanksgiving. I did not push further. I had learned years ago that pushing led only to a version of events that somehow made my reaction the problem. Instead, I said I needed to go, and I hung up, and I stood in my kitchen for a long time without doing anything. The clarity came in stages. Not all at once, not like a movie, just a slow widening of what I was willing to see. The first stage was remembering. I thought about the birthday party 3 years ago when I had driven 4 hours to bring a cake and decorations, and my mother had introduced me to her friends as my daughter who lives in Columbus. No follow-up. No nothing. While she thanked my brother's girlfriend for the flower arrangement that I had actually ordered and paid for. I thought about Christmas 2 years before that when I had bought the gifts for the whole family, wrapped them, shipped the ones that needed shipping, and watched my brother open a card that thanked him from all of us. The second stage was looking at the documents. I spent a Saturday going through every record I had kept: bank statements, transfer confirmations, text messages where my mother had asked for money in the casual shorthand people use when they do not expect to be refused. I found the original text thread from 6 years ago when she had first asked me to cover the rent. "Just for now, Dee," she had written. "You know how things are right now." I had said yes without a second thought. I had believed her. I printed everything. The lease agreement for the apartment that bore no trace of my name, the 6 years of monthly transfers, the insurance payments, the grocery receipts I had photographed out of some instinct I could not explain at the time but now understood as self-preservation. I laid them in a folder on my kitchen counter and put a rubber band around it and set it next to my coffee mug, and every morning when I made coffee, I looked at the folder and let the feeling settle into something quieter than anger. The third stage was Priya. Priya was my brother's fiancé's younger sister. She was 26, soft-spoken, studying nursing, and she had always been the kind of person who seemed vaguely uncomfortable with how her family operated. We had met at a dinner the previous spring, and she had sat across from me with her hands around her water glass and given me looks I had not known how to read at the time. She texted me on a Tuesday evening in late November. Her message said only, "Can we talk? Not at the house." We met at a coffee shop near her campus. She was already there when I arrived, turned halfway toward the window with her coat still on. She looked like someone who had been working up to something for a while. She told me she had been at the family dinner 2 weeks before the invitations went out. She told me that my brother and my mother had sat at the table and talked about the guest list and that my name had come up. She said my brother had called me exhausting. She said my mother had said that I had a way of centering myself in situations that were not about me. She said her own sister, my brother's fiancée, had nodded along without objecting. Then Priya reached into her bag and put her phone on the table. She had recorded it, she said. She had not planned to. Her phone had been sitting on the chair beside her, and the recording app had been open from a voice memo she had been working on earlier, and she had realized halfway through the conversation what was happening, and had let it keep running. She pressed play. I heard my mother's voice first. Familiar and measured, the tone she used when she was being reasonable at someone. She said she loved me but that I had a gift for making everything heavier than it needed to be. She said the wedding would be easier without that energy. My brother agreed in the flat, easy way he agreed with her about everything, and then his fiancée said, "She gives money but she takes up space," and everyone at the table laughed. She gives money but she takes up space. I sat with that sentence in the coffee shop with the recording still open on the table between us. Priya was watching me carefully. I did not cry. Not there, not then. The feeling was colder than crying. It was the specific sensation of having confirmed something you had half known for years but had kept just below the surface because knowing it fully would require you to do something about it. I thanked Priya. I asked her to send me the file. She nodded and sent it before I had even put my coat back on. I drove home and I sat in the parking garage of my building for 20 minutes with the engine off before going upstairs. That night I made a list. It was a practical list. The rent, $1,200 a month, paid through a recurring transfer from my personal checking account. My parents' car insurance, 1 policy, 2 vehicles, $240 a month, set to autopay on the 15th. My mother's phone plan, $85 a month, on a family account with my name as the primary holder. The joint credit card I had added her to 7 years ago for emergencies, with a $4,000 limit, which she used for things that were never emergencies. Every account, every line. I wrote them down in ink. Not because I needed to, I had them memorized, but because writing them made them real in a different way. Made them mine. Made it clear that all of it, every single thread that kept their daily life running smoothly, ran directly through me. My brother's wedding was in 6 weeks. I did not make any moves yet. I was not ready to be reckless. I had a colleague at work, a man named Gerald who had spent 15 years in finance before switching careers, and I asked him over lunch one day, framed as a hypothetical, whether a person was legally obligated to continue paying accounts that were in their own name. He put down his fork. He said that if the account was in your name, the authority over it was yours. That there was no legal obligation to maintain payments for someone else's benefit if you chose to stop. That removing an authorized user from a credit card required only a phone call. That canceling autopay required only logging in. He said the only complication would be if you had signed a contract guaranteeing payment to a third party, like a landlord or a utility company. But even then, the liability would shift to the primary resident, not the person who had voluntarily been covering the cost. He asked if everything was okay. I said it was. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing carefully, not out of fear, but because I had spent 6 years being impulsive about generosity, and I was determined not to be impulsive about anything again. I contacted the property management company for my brother's apartment and, without giving a reason, confirmed that the lease was in his name alone and that I had no binding obligation to the account. The woman on the phone confirmed it without interest. I documented every active transfer. I saved screenshots of every autopay. I moved the recording from Priya into a folder on my desktop and labeled it simply, Evidence. I drafted an email to my mother, explaining what I was going to do. I wrote 4 versions of it. Then I saved them all in drafts, and decided I would not send any of them. She had not extended me the courtesy of explanation. I did not owe her one either. The week before the wedding, I began. I removed my mother from the joint credit card on a Monday morning. The bank rep walked me through the process in under 4 minutes. She gave me a confirmation number. I wrote it down. Tuesday, I called the insurance company and removed both vehicles from my policy. The representative asked if I wanted to add them to a different policy. I said no. He said the current coverage would end in 30 days, unless the vehicles were insured under a new account. I said I understood. I saved the cancellation confirmation to the folder. Wednesday, I canceled the autopay on the phone plan. My mother's number would continue to function until the next billing cycle, at which point the account would go inactive without payment. I noted the date. Thursday, I logged into my bank account and canceled the standing transfer for the rent. I sat back in my chair after that last one and looked at the screen for a long time. The recurring transfer had been running so long that canceling it felt almost structural, like removing a beam. My apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the November rain had turned the streets dark and reflective. I was not angry. That surprised me a little. I had expected anger, the hot, shaking kind, but what I felt instead was very still. The stillness of a decision made cleanly, with full information. After a long and careful wait, the wedding was on a Saturday. I spent that morning doing laundry. I folded a week's worth of clothes and put them away and cleaned my bathroom and made soup from scratch because I had been meaning to do it for weeks and there was finally nothing else I felt I needed to do. My phone was on the counter, face up, and by noon it had begun to vibrate in the irregular pattern of someone checking it between other things. The first text came from my mother at 12:47. It said simply, D. The card is being declined at the florist. I was stirring the soup. I read the message and set the phone back down. 3 minutes later. The insurance company is saying the cars aren't covered. What's happening? Then my brother. Did you do something to the accounts? Then my mother again. Longer this time. Diana, I need you to call me right now. There must be some kind of mistake with the bank. The florist cannot hold the flowers without a confirmed payment, and the ceremony is in 4 hours. Please call me. I ladled soup into a bowl and carried it to the table. The messages continued. My brother's fiancé, who had never texted me before, sent a voice note I did not play. My mother called 3 times. My brother called twice. I watched the notifications stack on my screen with the same detached attention you give to weather on a day you have no reason to go outside. At 2 in the afternoon, a text from my brother. The florist gave away our order. Mom's car registration is flagged as uninsured. This is not okay, Diana. At 2:40, we know it was you. Call me. At 3:15, a number I did not recognize, which turned out to be the venue coordinator asking if there was an issue with the credit card on file for the rehearsal dinner balance. I let it ring. Priya texted at 3:30. Her message was 2 lines. The ceremony is chaos. Your mom is crying in the parking lot. I just wanted you to know. I wrote back. Thank you for telling me. The soup had gone cold. I reheated it and sat by the window and watched the rain come down outside. Somewhere across the city, my brother was getting married in a ceremony that had been planned with great care to exclude me. And the infrastructure of that ceremony, the flowers, the insured cars to drive to the venue, the card to cover the final vendor balance, was fraying in ways they had never thought to prepare for because it had never occurred to them that it could. They had thought of me as permanent, as given, as the kind of fixture that does not require maintenance because it has always simply been there. The calls slowed by evening. My mother left a voicemail at 6 that I listened to twice, not for the content, but because I needed to hear the tone of it. She said I had humiliated the family in front of everyone who mattered to her. She said what I had done was vindictive and childish. She said she could not believe her own daughter was capable of this. She did not ask why. She did not leave space in the message for any reason that was not about her. I saved the voicemail. Sunday was quiet. I went for a walk in the morning, the first one I had taken in weeks without carrying anything in my chest that felt too heavy to name. The air was cold and clean, and the streets were empty in the way they are after a rain. My brother called once, early. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short and clipped, the voice of someone who had rehearsed control over themselves after a night of something harder. He said he wanted to talk. He said this had gone far enough. He said if I had a problem I should have said something instead of doing what I did. I thought about that for a long time. About the 6 years of saying nothing while the transfers went through on the 1st of every month. About the texts I had sent asking whether we were okay and receiving one-word responses. About the dinner where his fiancée had thanked the family for the flowers I had ordered. About the voicemail I had not received about the wedding. The invitation that had never come. The one phone call he had promised and never made. I had said nothing. He was right about that. I had said nothing because saying something meant acknowledging what was happening, and acknowledging it meant making a choice, and making a choice meant giving up the belief that things might still even out on their own. I had given up that belief now. It did not feel like loss. It felt like finally setting something down that had been cutting into my hands for years. Monday morning I called my bank and made my last move. I removed my mother as a beneficiary on my account, something I had never thought to do before because it had never occurred to me that the relationship would one day require me to think about it. I updated my emergency contacts at work. Small administrative acts, the kind that take less than an hour but mean you are no longer operating on assumptions that no longer apply. I sent my mother an email that evening, not one of the 4 versions I had drafted before, but something shorter and plainer. I told her that the accounts she had been relying on were now in their appropriate hands, meaning no longer mine. I told her that I had kept records of every transfer going back 6 years and that I was happy to share that documentation with anyone who thought my choices warranted legal review. I told her I was not angry. I told her I hoped she would be well. I did not say I loved her. I did not know yet if that was still something I wanted to offer. She did not reply. My brother texted 2 days later. The message was longer than I expected. He said he understood that I was upset. He said the wedding had been a disaster and that he and his new wife had argued about it on the drive to their hotel. He said my mother had told him, for the first time, the full amount of what I had been paying over the years, and that the number had shaken him. He said he did not know it had been that much. I believed him. That was the part that took me the longest to hold. Not the betrayal itself, but the particular shape of it. The way people can accept a gift for years without ever asking what it cost the person giving it, without ever looking directly at the hand that was offering. My brother had not been cruel in the premeditated way my mother had. He had simply never looked. I did not write back that day. I needed more time before I knew what to say to someone who had learned too late that they had been part of something without realizing it. What I did instead was open my laptop and, for the first time in weeks, close the folder labeled evidence without adding anything to it. Not because the story was over, because it was not. Loose ends like my mother's reaction and the question of what the next few months would look like were still working themselves out. But, because the folder had served its purpose. It had been the record I kept when I needed proof that I was not imagining it. I did not need that proof anymore. I knew what had happened. I had always known. I had just finally allowed myself to act on it. I made myself coffee and sat by the window with a book I had been meaning to read for months. The city outside was bright and ordinary. People walked their dogs. Someone across the street was stringing lights along a balcony railing, the kind that come out in November and stay until February. I watched them for a while, the way the lights swayed when the wind picked up, steady and small against the gray sky. I thought about what Priya had said when she first put her phone on the table in the coffee shop. She had looked at me and said, "I knew you needed to hear it, but I also knew it would hurt." I had told her it was okay. She had said it was not okay, and I had nodded, and we had sat there in the ordinary noise of that coffee shop with the truth between us on the table, bright and cold and necessary. The hurt had been real. I was not going to pretend otherwise. There is no version of what happened where I come out of it untouched, where 6 years of one-sided giving just rolls off me without leaving a mark. The hurt lives in the specific memory of my brother's voicemail, flat and rehearsed, and in the way my mother had used the word complicated, and in the recording where the woman who was about to become my sister-in-law laughed and said I took up space. But the hurt was mine now. I was not carrying it for anyone else anymore. I had learned something in the months since October that I could not have understood before it happened. That love and money are not the same thing, no matter how much we use them interchangeably. That paying someone's bills is not the same as being seen by them. That you can be financially indispensable to people who have never once considered what it would cost you to become dispensable to them. I had made myself indispensable. I had done it carefully and consistently, and without ever demanding acknowledgement, because some part of me believed that the giving itself was enough, that it would accumulate into something, that it would eventually be recognized and returned. That is the quietest kind of transaction, the one you make with yourself about what love is supposed to look like. I had been wrong about it, knowing that now was not a comfortable thing, but it was a clean one. If you have ever been the person in your family who handles things, who transfers money on the first, who adds people to accounts because it seemed easier, who shows up with the cake and watches someone else take the credit for the warmth in the room, I want you to hear something. The accounts were always yours. The authority was always yours. What you gave freely, and no one can take that from you. But freely given is not the same as endlessly owed, and recognizing the difference is not selfishness. It is the beginning of knowing what you are actually worth. I did not destroy my family. I stopped funding a version of it that had already decided I did not belong. That is not the same thing. If this story touched something in you, share it in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. And if you have ever had to choose your own peace over someone else's comfort, tell me about it. Every story like this one deserves to be heard. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one, because there are more truths here, more voices, and we are only just getting started.